Hi all, this is my roughly 3 to 4,000 round Somogear NGAL potted green review. To start off with, I purchased it from Paragon Armory for about 460 bucks sometime in Q1 of 2024. And we're going to do this whole review based on my expectations. So I was expecting to get an NGAL form factor, durable enough to run on this 5x6 SBR. It's a little LMT. And I expected it to have a full powered illuminator. I had looked at the 4MAWL Ranch review and a couple of other reviews on YouTube, and I was like, that's worth gambling on. At this point in time, I owned a bunch of other IR options, Surefire Vampires, the CTF2 with the Kiji head. I owned a Holliston 321G. I had owned the Modlite 850 and 940 heads. Some Viridian HS1 lasers. I had really a lot of different options to try and avoid paying for a MAWL. And this was my last attempt before I broke down and finally bought a MAWL. So let's talk about, did it meet those expectations? So the form factor. The unit's smaller than most all of my night vision devices, and it's the most performant at its size. Like a kind of independent of size. The mode selector is pretty reasonably laid out, and while it's not as intuitive as a MAWL or this CTF2, it's easily learned with a little bit of experience. Here's a photo I took of the NGAL clone with Modlite OKW next to a CTF2 and a MAWL with an Arisaka 300 series light. So to kind of give you the comparison of size, I really liked that the blue lockout screws had a place on the unit to be stored when in full power mode is unlocked. And the button that came with the unit, I'm going to call it a mod button clone, worked well, but I ended up replacing it with the Somoboat 3-button switch to get a Viz override button. So for durability, it survived a rifle mechanics that's about 1,000 round class, and a night vision 1 class, which is another 1,000 round class, and a night vision CQB class, which was a couple hundred rounds, but it was all Sims ammo, so not real recoil. But the CQB class involved a lot of modifying the illuminator settings based on the environment. And so there was more switch use and more power use and more cap use during that class. Factory caps have not had any issues, have not fallen off or broken in the last few months of use. I've had no issues from training a couple of times in the rain, nor from heat for my suppressor. As you can tell on this gun, I've got a Trash Panda on an 11.5. The can gets pretty hot, and I haven't had any issues. And if you can tell, it's actually overlapping. It's about as close to the can as I can get it. Power is definitely a full power illuminator and laser, with the illuminator at the most focused and on dual high. I would say the illuminator is about 90% of a MAWL C1 Plus brightness, which brings me to my first big downside. The laser brightness is too bright for the given illuminator brightness. Shooting white paper targets on low from a close-ish range like you might do at a night vision 1 class will make you want to back up. Shooting steel further away, the laser, when it gets on the white steel, it'll bloom and overpower the illuminator, make it hard to tell where on the steel you're aiming. More on how I mitigated that a little bit later. The Viz laser, however, is the best part of the Somogear NGAL unit, and I don't see nearly enough people talking about it in their reviews. Visually, it's significantly brighter than any other green laser I own, including the MAWL. Why is that such a big deal? Because most people who talk to me in matches about the Somogear are earlier in their night vision journey and are struggling to justify the cost of a PVS-14 and a mount and a helmet, and the idea of doubling that very expensive cost just to get a laser illuminator makes the cost feel unfeasible. So these same new to night vision shooters have a handful of skills to either learn or reinforce depending on your perspective. Like loading and unloading in the dark is slightly harder. Focusing a night vision device is just a new skill. It's not hard, just something you have to learn and figure out when you need to do it. Passive aiming is a new skill. And each one of those another one of those skills is activating a laser / illuminator and using it to aim. That skill doesn't have to be practiced at night. If you're like me and your time to shoot under night vision is limited, a daytime bright laser is a great way to practice activation and shooting and not following the laser with my eyes, which is a technique to speed up your shooting and to shoot a little bit more accurately. So if you're new to night vision and looking to see if you can get away with a less than $500 IR illuminator and laser, the answer is yes, but it won't be your last laser. So let's get into shortcomings. My unit arrived and could not tightly clamp to any of the several pick rails I had around. I had to contact the distributor and get a replacement clamp, which arrived in a few days, but in the meantime, I had to shim the device with some metal ductwork foil in order to be able to get those first 2 classes out of the way, because I brought this to class. It arrived just before I left for that 4-day class, those 2 classes back to back. The flathead spots here are really small and pretty thin. It came with a tool, which is awesome. I appreciate that. The tool is bigger than can fit like in a grip of an AR-15. So you have to have a special tool in your bag, and it's too thick to use the rim of a case or something else like that. After the initial 0, I found out that the Multitasker Nano 2 tools, which are usually used for handgun optics, that those have a flathead that works, which is pretty awesome. And I think that it's probably a reasonable trade-off for the size to have those thinner adjustments and have those adjustments not be able to be knocked, compared to the MAWL where the gyro adjustment can be done with a coin or a brass, but it is still a trade-off. After the clamp was fixed and the unit remounted, I verified the new parks worked in practice with a few local matches, and I took it to the 3-day night vision CQB class taught by Kinetic Consulting down in Blakely, Georgia. This is where the real limitations of the unit compared to something like a MAWL or a CTF2 with a Kiji really started to hurt. On the lowest power setting with the widest illuminator, it was too bright when used indoors to do positive identification of kind of complicated targets, like a person holding a flashlight like this, down kind of where you might have a handgun. And I found myself using the Viz override button and looking under my nods to shoot a bunch of times in order to make the threat non-threat determination, or look under my nods and not shoot. That was tough. The class also showed me how nice a Viz override function could be. During one run in the shoot house, I had an extremely long hallway with a bad guy and a hostage at the very end. And the bad guy had a flashlight that was pointed down the highway. I don't believe any of the IR illuminators could have overwhelmed that white light alone. The whole point was to drive you into Viz or like drive you into white light territory. But with the Viz override button, it let me push the full OKW force down that hallway, overcome the bad guy's light, make the threat non-threat determination, figure out which of the two two people at the back was the bad guy, and make that shot. The last 2 small nitpicks are the battery retention cap rubber is really thin and gets bound up easily, so I removed it. That said, this also came up in the 4MR Ranch video. That said, the unit I purchased in July of 2024 has significantly thicker battery retention rubber coating, and on that unit, which I don't have nearly as many rounds through, I added a little graphite dry lubricant, and so far it is not bound up or spun. It's held the battery cap on. I've been able to change batteries on it, etc., and it's worked out pretty well. I'm looking forward to that not being a problem on the second unit. We'll see. Right now, I don't have enough rounds on it to know if the second unit will have the same issues I had on the first with the battery cap. The other issue that I had that was kind of a nitpick was I struggled to find a place that the Somoboat could fit on a 9-inch rail and still let me have the battery on the unit be replaced. I had to work really hard on placement. I had to compromise my support hand grip in order to be able to have that ability. And I didn't really think it was acceptable that if my battery died, that on the unit that I would have to take the switch off in order to replace the battery. So all of that leads me to modifications. Trying to overcome some of those limitations I listed previously, I purchased the factory NGAL diffuser caps for the illuminator and the laser, and found the laser diffuser acted like more like a dimmer, and it dimmed the laser than a diffuser. Whereas the illuminator diffuser cap winds up diffusing so much, it turns the unit into a whole room illuminator. Outdoors, I can barely tell the illuminator is on. So this is technically better for indoors because at least there's some illumination and I can see the laser on the target. But it falls short of my expectation because illuminating through several thresholds requires breaking my left hand off the gun to remove the diffuser cap, which I felt was a little too slow, especially when I was like, what's in that dark corner? To deal with the Somoboat taking most of my rail estate, I wound up buying the Unity Axon NGAL switch with Viz Override. A little bit hard to find switch, but it's really awesome. When I purchased the Somoboat, I read that the Somogear switches, only Somogear switches would activate the Viz Override, but the Defensive Mechanisms put out a video and I just asked them in a comment, hey, do the real switches work? And they were like, absolutely, we've had no issues. So I wasn't willing to risk the full price just to have it not work with my unit, and I don't have a real NGAL. But it was awesome that they responded to a comment in the video letting me know, and I purchased it, and I agree, it totally works. I love the form factor, but I found that if I ever wanted white light without a green laser, keeping the laser cap on, so keeping this cap on, or turning the NGAL off worked really well. So I didn't need a button that was dedicated to white light without the Viz Override. The Axon switch and the L3 diffuser caps both improve the unit's ergonomics for use indoors, but introduce one last issue. Viz Override no longer has a green laser. Because of the way the diffuser cap works on the laser side, it diffuses the IR laser and blocks the green laser, which means that if you value having a fast Viz Override, keeping the diffuser cap on to have the brightness be at the appropriate level is worse. So now you've still got to decide, do I want a too bright laser or do I want to be able to do Viz Override? So it's still a little bit of a shortcoming. Final thoughts. The Somogear NGAL has replaced my recommendation if your budget's under $1,000 from the Holosun 321G to the Somogear NGAL potted green Viz laser. I think it's mechanically and feature-wise superior. The best argument for the Holosun products is their warranty is better. But I think the Somogear's footprint, aftermarket support from both Somogear and Unity, the daytime bright laser, and the cost really make it a compelling option. However, some of the suboptimal performance indoors were what finally pushed me to the camp of just buy a MAWL. I've spent easily more than a MAWL's amount of money determining that I should have just bought a MAWL. The MAWL really is an ergonomic option, and it'll be on my main rifle moving forward. So let's go look at the final build setup. So for you visual people out there, here is the final setup. This is a Unity switch with Viz Override. I've got the NGAL mounted pretty far forward. I have a mod light with a DS00. I'm using some Ranger bands for my cable management. And then finally, there is one of the two multitasker nano tools on the gun. The other one's in the grip. So I can adjust my red dot, and then the other one can adjust the Somogear. And this setup is awesome. I really like it. And here is the setup I'm moving to. So this is a 12.5 Spec War. This is going to have a MAWL. Right now I have the lightest light, I think, that has the appropriate power level. We're going to go run this outdoors in Texas in a couple of months, shooting some pigs, and we're going to see if that needs to be a mod light OKW. And if it does, then the front end of this gun is getting heavy. But this is the long term, this is probably what I should have started with. And then finally, this is a 22 Plinker It's a raccoon gun. It's also a gun that people who are interested in trying out night vision for the first time, if I'm paying for ammo, it's the gun I loan them. And this has also has my second Somogear on it. I liked it enough to buy another one. It has the original button that the Somogears come with. That is kind of a mod button clone, and it works out really well on this lightweight 22 AR. I hope this helped somebody out who's out there considering if the Somogear is their option. I would say it's a heck of a value, and also, it's not a MAWL.